Hello everyone, welcome back to CLAT Tutor. Imagine waking up one morning and discovering that if your country is attacked, 31 countries immediately come to your defense. Sounds unbelievable. Well, that is exactly what NATO is all about. Today we will understand what is NATO, why was it created, why does Russia oppose NATO, or why did the Russia-Ukraine war begin? Why are Finland and Sweden now NATO members? What happened at the latest NATO summit? And finally, the most expected CLAT question. So let us begin. NATO stands for North Atlantic Treaty Organization. It is both a military alliance and a political alliance formed by North American and European countries. Its entire existence revolves around one sentence, Article 5. An attack on one member is considered an attack on all members. Suppose someone attacked France. That means Germany, Italy, Canada, United States, United Kingdom, and every NATO member has a responsibility to help. This principle is called collective defense. Now, let us go back a bit in history and try finding out what was the reason for NATO to get formed. To understand NATO, we have to go back to 1945. World War II had just ended. Europe was devastated, millions had died, entire cities were destroyed. But another conflict was already beginning, the Cold War. The world was divided into Western Bloc led by the United States and the Eastern Bloc led by the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union gradually expanded its influence across Eastern Europe. Countries like Poland, Hungary, Romania, Bulgaria, Czechoslovakia all came under communist government. Western Europe became increasingly worried. They need to be. Then came another major crisis, the Berlin blockade of 1948. The Soviet Union blocked all land routes into West Berlin. This convinced Western countries that they needed a permanent military alliance, and that was the formation of NATO. On 4th April 1949, 12 countries signed the North Atlantic Treaty, also called the Washington Treaty. These 12 countries became the founding members of NATO. The headquarters was established in Brussels, Belgium. Today, NATO has become the world's most powerful military alliance. Now, let us talk about in Article 5, which is very, very important. The most important part of NATO is Article 5. It states, one attack on one member equal to an attack on all members. Interestingly, Article 5 has been formally invoked only once. Yes, Article 5 has been invoked only once, which was on September 11 attack in the United States. All NATO members came together to support America. This shows how seriously NATO treats collective defense. Now let us come to one more important part, which is called Warsaw Pact. The Soviet Union did not remain silent. In 1955, it created the Warsaw Pact. This became NATO's rivalry military alliance. During the Cold War, Europe was divided between NATO and Warsaw Pact. The Warsaw Pact finally dissolved in 1991 after the collapse of Soviet Union. Now let us try spending some time with the NATO expansion. Initially, NATO had 12 members. Over time, more countries joined. After the Cold War, countries from Eastern Europe also joined NATO. Russia viewed this expansion with increasing concern. The biggest recent additions are Finland, joined in 2023, and Sweden, joined in 2024. Both countries abandoned decade of military neutrality after Russia invaded Ukraine. So today NATO has 32 members. Now there will be one question in your mind, why does Russia oppose NATO? Yes, so that is something which you will always find now and then everywhere, that Russia keeps on opposing NATO. Now this is a perfect and the most important question for CLAT. Russia believes NATO keeps moving closer to its border. Now no one will like that military alliance or military group coming close to the borderline. Countries that were once part of the Soviet sphere, have gradually joined NATO. Russia considered this as a direct security threat. Particularly, Russia strongly opposed the possibility of Ukraine joining NATO. This issue lies at the heart of the Russia-Ukraine conflict. The conflict began in a stage. In 2014, Russia annexed Crimea. Fighting also began in eastern Ukraine. Then on 24th February 2022, Russia launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Ukraine has repeatedly expressed a desire to become a NATO member. Russia has repeatedly declared this unacceptable. Although Ukraine has strengthened cooperation with NATO, its membership remains unresolved while the war continues. At the last NATO summit, leaders reaffirmed their commitment to supporting Ukraine. The alliance pledged continued military assistance or strengthening cooperation and discussed further security challenges. And major issue discussed was increasing defense spending among NATO members. We are going to discuss in another minute or so. A long-standing demand strongly supported by US President Donald Trump. Now, why NATO is important today? Today, NATO is much more than a military alliance. It works on cybersecurity, artificial intelligence, counterterrorism, critical infrastructure, space security, as well as climate security, maritime security, and emerging technologies. This shows how NATO has evolved from a Cold War alliance into a broader security organization. Now, let us come directly to CLAT. What are the important points which we need to remember from CLAT point of view? So we need to remember when NATO was formed, which was 4th April 1949. We need to remember headquarters, Brussels and Belgium, current members 32. Newest member who got added was Finland and Sweden. And most important, Article 5, attack on one means attack on all. As well as we need to understand Cold War rival, which was Warsaw Pact. Now, Russia opposed NATO eastward expansion, especially any further membership for Ukraine. Now, let us discuss, let us spend some time, regarding latest NATO summit. So now let us move to the important part. The latest NATO summit was held on 7th and 8th July 2026 in Ankara, Turkey. It was hosted by Turkish president and it was attended by the leaders of all 32 NATO members countries. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte chaired the summit. This summit focused on 4 major issues. Okay, one more thing, you don't need to keep on writing the notes. We are going to provide PDF in the end, so you can download that PDF and you can do revision, so that will take care of all your notes. So let us come back once again to this 4 major issue which was discussed in the recent NATO summit. So first was strengthening the NATO's collective defense. The leader reaffirmed Article 5, the cornerstone of NATO, starting once again an attack on one means attack on all members. This also reviewed NATO's military readiness and deterrence against emerging threat. The second was defense spending. Now, one of the biggest discussion was defense spending. At the 2025 NATO summit in The Hague, members agreed to work towards spending 5% of their GDP on defense by 2035. At the 2026 Ankara summit, leaders reviewed progress and noted that European alliance and Canada had already significantly increased defense investment since that pledge. Now, third important part which was discussed was support for Ukraine. Yes, NATO leaders reiterated their unwavering support for Ukraine. They pledged 70 billion pounds in military equipment, assistance and training for Ukraine during 2026, while also committing to maintain at least a similar level of support in 2027. Ukraine once again appealed for NATO membership, but no timeline for accession was announced because the war with Russia continues. Now, the fourth discussion point was defense technology and innovation. The summit also emphasized strengthening NATO's technological edge. Leaders announced more than $50 billion in defense procurement, greater cooperation in AI, drones, missile technology, cybersecurity, and emerging technologies. Somewhere, 27 billion pound investment to modernize NATO's fuel supply chain and logical infrastructure was also discussed. Now let us take a few minutes to discuss about Donald Trump's position on NATO. One of the biggest talking points at the 2026 NATO Summit was the role of United States President Donald Trump. For several years, Trump has argued that European NATO members should contribute more to their own defense instead of relying heavily on the United States. His core message has remained constant. Every NATO member should pay its fair value. Trump believes that the United States has carried a disproportionate share of NATO's defense burden for decades. At the Ankara summit, while he continued to press allies on defense spending, he also reaffirmed that United States commitment to NATO Article 5, reassuring allies that Washington remains committed to the allies' collective defense. When we want to know Trump's positions on Ukraine, Trump has adopted dual approach. On one hand, he has repeatedly called for a negotiated settlement to end the war. On the other hand, at the 2026 summit, he supported continued military assistance for Ukraine, including backing the production of Patriot air defense system in cooperation with Ukraine. Now, Trump's vision for NATO, we can summarize NATO policy in three words: burden sharing, strong defense spending, and peace through strength. He supports NATO but insists that every member should invest more in its own defense capabilities. Now, let us go ahead and talk about what are the important points from CLAT exam perspective. So this year, NATO summit date need to be remembered 7 to 8 July 2026. Venue need to remember, which is Ankara, Turkey. Key decision we need to remember, which is continued support for Ukraine, stronger defense investment, and reaffirmation of Article 5. Trump's stand, which is support to NATO but insists that European allies should spend more on defense and share the financial burden more equally. To summarize, NATO remains one of the most influential organizations in global politics, from its origin in the Cold War to its central role at the Russia-Ukraine conflict. It continued to shape international security. So for CLAT aspirants, remember the timeline, the significance of Article 5, NATO's expansion, the Warsaw Pact, and the connection between NATO enlargement and the Russia-Ukraine conflict. If you found this video useful, like, share, and subscribe to CLAT Tutor. Thank you very much.